Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So we continue. So last session we discussed that other believers should be safe from our hands and our tongues, and their properties and their honor should also be safe as well. So now let's continue. So the author continues to say, وَحَاسِبْ نَفْسَكَ فِي كُلِّ خَطَرَةٍ, and take yourself to account in every thought. So for every thought that occurs in yourself, then take yourself to account. So I'm going to read the commentary of this. So the commentator says, دافع الخطر, that's فإن لم تفعل صارت شهوة. So whenever you have a thought to do a bad deed, or whenever a thought occurs in your mind that you want to do something bad, دافع الخطر, push this thought away. فإن لم تفعل صارت شهوة. What happens is if continuously thoughts that keep on coming into your mind to do bad, and you don't move them away, then it becomes this thought, khatara, turns into a shahwa, turns into a desire. So then when this thought constantly keeps on coming, then this will become a desire in your heart. So let's say a thought comes in to do a sin, and you don't do anything about it. Next time that same thought's going to come in, then it's going to become shahwa. فَإِن لَمْ تَفْعَلْ صَارَتْ عَزِيمَةً. Now when it gets to the shahwa, if you don't remove the desire from your heart, then what's going to happen? And the thoughts keep on coming, صارت عزيمة وهمة. They will become a firm intention. So first it starts with thought develops into a desire, and the desire turns into a resolve and intention. And if you don't get rid of it at this stage, what happens? فَإِن لَمْ تُدَافِعْهَا صَارَتْ فِعْلًا. If you don't get rid of it at this stage, then it turns into action. فَإِن لَمْ تَتَدَارَكُوا بِضِدِّهِ صَارَ عَادَةً. Now once you start doing this action, if you don't get rid of it at this stage, then what happens? This one action will turn into an عادة. فَيَصُبْ عَلَيْكَ الْإِنْتِقَالُ عَنْهَا. Then once it becomes an عادة, a habit, then it will be very, very, very difficult for you to remove this. So the commentator continues, وَعْلَمْ أَنَّ مَبْدَأَ كُلِّ عِلْمٍ اخْتِيَارٍ هُوَ الْخُوَاطِرُ وَالْأَفْكَارُ فَإِنَّهَا تُوجِبُ التَّصَوُّرَاتِ وَالتَّصَوُّرَاتُ تَدْعُو إِلَى الْإِرَادَاتِ وَالْإِرَادَاتُ تَقْضِي وُقُوعَ الْفِعْلِ. So basically it's saying the same thing. So everything starts off with thoughts, and these thoughts turn into a picture in front of you. And then this picture turns into this imagination basically. So this thought turns into an imagination turns into a desire or a will, and this will turns into an action. So he's saying, so now how do we correct, in Islam we're taught, how do we correct our actions? فَصَلَاحُ هَذِهِ الْمَرَاتِ بِصَلَاحِ الْخَوَاتِرِ. So how do I change my habits? How do I correct my actions? Is from stage one, where when we notice that we've got a desire or thought comes in to do sin, we eradicate it at that stage. Once it becomes a habit, then it's very difficult. That's why they say to change your habits, it's easier to move a mountain than to change your habits. And then he continues, he says, فَالصَّلَاحُ الْخَوَاتِرِ بِأَنْ تَكُونَ مُرَاقِبَةً لِوَلِيِّهَا وَإِلَهِهَا. So how do you control your thoughts then? So he's saying that first, the most important way is the muraqabah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Knowing that Allah, so keep on contemplating that every moment that Allah is aware of me. Allah is looking at me, Allah is with me, Allah is hearing me. صَاعِدَةً إِلَيْهِ دَائِرَةً عَلَى مَرْضَاتِهِ وَمَحَابَّةً وَمَحَابِّ فَإِنَّ سُبْحَانَهُ بِكُلِّ صَلَاحٍ وَمِنْ عِنْدِ كُلُّ هُدَى. So basically it's a constant muraqabah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, awareness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this desire to please Him and to attain His love, and this realization that guidance is only from Him, misguidance is only from Him, and so on and so on. Then he says, وَعْلَمْ أَنَّ الْخَطَرَاتِ وَالْوَسَاوِسِ تُؤَدِّي مُتَعَلِّقَاتِ إِلَى الْفِكْرِ فَيَأْخُذُهَا الْفِكْرُ فَيُؤَدِّيهَا إِلَى التَّذَكُّرِ فَيَأْخُذُهَا. Basically it's saying the same thing, so I'm going to skip a few of these. Okay, so then it says, وَمَعْلُومٌ أَنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَمْ يُعْطَ إِمَاتَةَ الْخَوَاتِرِ. So he's saying it's known that a person, we can't choose to not have any bad thoughts. This is natural. وَلَا الْقُوَّةَ عَلَى قَطْعِهَا. We can't cut these off. فَإِنَّهَا تَهْجُمُ عَلَيْهِ هُجُومَ النَّفَسِ. Bad thoughts come to us just like how we breathe. Just how we can't stop our breathing intentionally. Likewise, we can't stop these bad thoughts. إِلَّا أَنَّ قُوَّةَ الْإِيمَانِ وَالْعَقْلِ تُعِينُ عَلَى قَبُولِ أَحْسِنِهَا وَرِضَاهُ بِهِ. Except that it's the strength of a person's iman and the intelligence or intellect is also important, which helps a person to accept from amongst our thoughts, those thoughts which are good. It's the strength of a person's iman that allows that person to leave the bad thoughts and to take the good thoughts. So that's what he's saying. وعلى دفع أقبحها وكراتها ونفرتها منه. وقد خلق الله سبحانه وتعالى النفس شبيهة برحى. So he is saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created our nafs, this our soul that desires to do bad. Or it's Allah's created it like a grind, like a grind mill. You have, let's say you have seeds or something, you crush them, and it's constantly turning. So he's saying our soul is like a grind mill, it's constantly turning. لا تسكن ولا بد لها من شيء تطحنه. And our soul, it's always turning. It's like a grind mill, and it always needs something to. What do you do when you grind something? To grind. You always need something to grind. فإن وضع فيها حب طحنته. If you place a seed in it, it will grind the seed. وإن وضع فيها تراب أو حصى طحنته. If you place sand in it or stones in it, it will also grind anything. Basically, our soul, it needs something to grind. فالأفكار والخواطر التي تجول في النفس هي بمنزلة الحب. So the thoughts that come into our mind, they're like the seed. The thoughts that come into our mind are like the seed. الذي يدع في الرحى, which are placed in this grind mill now. ولا تبقى تلك الرحى معتلة قط, and this mill is always turning. بل لا بد لها من شيء يوضع فيها. فمن الناس من تطحن رحاه حبا يخرج دقيقا ينفع به نفسه. So basically it's saying, the summary of this is that our thoughts, basically our nafs, our soul, is like that grind mill, and the seed is basically our thoughts. So if we put good thoughts inside this, then it will benefit us. So now we can choose what we want to contemplate on. If I want to contemplate constantly in the dunya, if I want to contemplate on sin, if I want to constantly engage in my thoughts with the worldly things, then that's what's going to happen. But I can choose to focus more on the akhirah, more on the a'mal, more on good deeds, more on ilm, more on knowledge, more on things that will benefit us. So we as humans can choose which seeds I want to place in this grind mill. So that's basically what the author is saying. And then he says, okay, so now going back to the main book. So then he says, وَرَاقِبِ اللَّهَ فِي كُلِّ نَفَسٍ. Then be mindful of Allah with every single breath. So it's very easy to say, but imagine the level of these people. Look at the level of the iman. Imagine such people being mindful of Allah every single breath. And this is actually a Sufi practice as well. Many scholars, even today, they would actually train their murids to be able to do this. They have there's one concept in tasawwuf, they call this, it's in Farsi, they call it pass and fast, where they train their murids to, when you breathe in, you say Allah, and when you breathe out, say Hu, Allahu. So, but you do this subconsciously. So basically 24/7 while you're awake, you're constantly in the dhikr of Allah. Yeah, this isn't a sunnah, so it's not or fard or wajib, but this is how they would train them. So then they get to a stage where by default, when you're breathing, their murids would all be doing dhikr. So this is just like a training stage they would make their murids go through. So when you breathe in, Allahu, Allahu, until it just becomes natural. And then by default, a person, your heart is always engaged in dhikr, whether you realize it or not. But, this is not the... But anyway, so he's saying, be mindful of Allah with every single breath. And then قال عمر رضي الله عنه, Umar رضي الله عنه would say, حاسبوا. So this is the first thing, be mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. راقب يراقب مرام means to be in deep contemplation. And this is something that we've really forgotten. We need to sit down. There needs to be times where we sit down and we truly contemplate. There's few things we should contemplate. Number one is we contemplate about the reality of this world. Because one thing is knowledge. One thing is knowledge. And the knowledge, we internalize the knowledge by contemplating. Many of us, we have this knowledge, we know about the akhirah, we know the shortness of this world, but because we don't take time out from our busy lives, sit down, close our eyes and just contemplate, this knowledge does not sink in. So hence, because this knowledge has not sunk in, we'll see our actions that are contrary. So a person that truly knows that they will stand in front of Allah, how many hours in a day will they waste their time? How many times will they disobey Allah? Because yes, we have knowledge of the hereafter, but because we haven't contemplated on it, this knowledge has not sunk in. So hence we've not been able to internalize it. So what we do every day, we do muraqabah. Number one, what do we do muraqabah of? Number one, we do muraqabah of with the reality of this world. So we understand how short, we contemplate how short this life is. That let's say how many years have gone past for my life now? How many years of my life is left? How short this life is, why Allah has created us, why Allah has given me eyes, why Allah has given me hands, why Allah has given me feet, hands, and so on, and my intellect and so on. So we come to the realization that this life is absolutely short. So hence what we do, we need to start doing good deeds for the hereafter. So then what happens once we internalize this knowledge that life is short, how many hours of, how much time of my life would I spend in those things which don't benefit me in this world and the hereafter? How many hours will I spend just on games or useless things that don't benefit me for the hereafter? So when we pass away, the first question we'll ask, and when we see each other on the Day of Judgment, we'll ask, how long were we alive for? The first person will say, I think we're alive for a day or half a day. That's what it will feel like. So now this 1 day or half a day that we have in this world, if we truly understood how short this life is and the vastness of the hereafter, how much time would we waste? How much time would we spend in doing sins? It was narrated from, I'm not sure about the reference for this, but it was narrated from the previous ummahs that when they were told that the last ummah, their lifespan will be 60, 70, 80 years or 100 years, when they heard this, they were shocked, because imagine Nuh alayhi salam, he gave da'wah for 950 years. Imagine how their lifespan was. So when they heard that the lifespan of this ummah was 60, 70, 80 years, they said, okay, if our life was so short, I'd spend our whole life in sajda. We don't have time for anything else. So when the realization of the shortness of this life comes into place, what happens is we'll start working towards a hereafter. So number one, the reality of this world. Number two, we look at the world around us so that we understand the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We understand the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Look at the skies, look at the sun, look at the moon, look at our bodies, look at everything. So we understand the greatness of Allah. So we can truly connect with our Creator. And number three, we contemplate on the hereafter. We contemplate on the stages of the Day of Judgment. Contemplate on death. Every so often at night, maybe 5 to 10 minutes before we go to sleep, we sit down and close our eyes and just imagine death, because death is inevitable. It's going to happen to each and every one of us. So just close your eyes and imagine that your body is lying there. Your family members are shrouding you. Many of your sons or your daughters or your brothers and sisters, they'll be there. They'll be crying. They'll do your ghusl, then they'll shroud you, then your family members will take you to the grave. Imagine, because every one of us will be there. Imagine, close your eyes, and imagine that you are 6 feet under the ground and Munkar and Nakir questioning us. So and then imagine being resurrected on the Day of Judgment. All the Anbiya are there. Every person from Adam alayhi salam till Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam is there. Imagine the incident that the Prophet has told us, that the whole mankind will go to Adam alayhi salam, then to Nuh alayhi salam, and then say, go to Allah and ask for, intercede in front of Allah. Every Prophet will say, what will happen to me, what will happen to me. So, and imagine, contemplate on the book of deeds being placed on the right hand or left hand, contemplate on the scales and so on. So once we contemplate the reality of this, it slowly comes within us. And then Umar radiallahu anhu said, Hasibu, so this is the first thing, muraqaba, contemplation. So the knowledge of this sinks in. Number two, Umar radiallahu anhu would say, Hasibu anfusakum. This is muhasaba. Hasibu anfusakum qabla an tuhasabu. Take yourselves to account before you are taken account. So take yourselves account, take account of yourselves before someone else takes account of you, meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَزِنُوهَا قَبْلَ أَن تُوزَنُوا. And weigh your good deeds before your good deeds are weighed for you. وَتَزَيَّنُوا لِلْعَرْضِ الْأَكْبَرِ. And prepare for the ultimate presentation, meaning the Day of Judgment. يَوْمَ لَا تَخْفَى مِنْكُمْ خَافِيَةٌ. On the day where not even the slightest secret will be hidden. And there's a narration that one of the pious people of the past, they would say that, his name was وَيُرُوا عَنْ مَيْمُونِ ibn Mihran, he would say, لَا يَكُونُ الْعَبْدُ تَقِيًّا حَتَّى يُحَاسِبَ نَفْسَهُ. A person cannot attain righteousness, meaning become a pious person, حَتَّى يُحَاسِبَ نَفْسَهُ, until he takes himself into account. كَمَا يُحَاسِبُ شَرِيكَهُ مِنْ أَيْنَ مَطْعَمْهُ مَا لَبَسُهُ. You know how when we have a business, at the end of the business, either the end of the business day, or at the end of the business week or business month, we look at all of our expenditure, we look at all of our profits, we look at what we've done good, we look at what we've done bad. If we're making a loss, we see how we can make it. This is what we call muhasaba. We do this for our business in this world, our business in the hereafter. So the pious people of the past, what they would do muhasaba of the a'mal of the full day. Before they go to sleep, think, what good did I do today? Did I miss, did I fulfill my fara'id? Did I fulfill my sunnah? Did I fulfill my nawafil? Did I do my recitation of the Quran, my adhkar? Did I do enough to prepare myself for the hereafter? Did I do anything bad? Did I do anything which is haram? With my eyes, with my hands, with my feet, with my heart? So we take ourselves to account. So then what happens when we take ourselves to account? If we notice that we've done anything bad, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness. If we notice we've done anything good, then we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then we see, how do I improve tomorrow? Let's say today, Fajr time, I wasn't able to do my adhkar or my recitation. I think to myself, tomorrow I need to do better. Or let's say Dhuhr time, I was supposed to do something and I wasn't able to. I think, tomorrow I need to do better. So we take ourselves into account. Another author, he says, I believe it's Imam Hassan al-Basri, he says, إِنَّ الْمُؤْمِنَ قَوَّامٌ عَلَى نَفْسِهِ. A believer is in charge of himself. يُحَاسِبُ نَفْسَهُ لِلَّهِ. That he takes himself to account for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَإِنَّمَا خَفَّ الْحِسَابُ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ عَلَى قَوْمٍ حَاسَبُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ فِي الدُّنْيَا. On the Day of Judgment, those believers, their scales will be easy. Only those who are used to taking themselves to account in the dunya. So those of us who take ourselves to account in the world, what will happen is we would have done tawbah for our mistakes. We would have known what we need to do. We're constantly improving. So hence our scales will be easy on the Day of Judgment. وَإِنَّمَا شَقَّ الْحِسَابُ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ عَلَى قَوْمٍ أَخَذُوا هَذَا الْأَمْرَ مِنْ غَيْرِ مُحَاسَبَةٍ. And those people who find their scales very difficult in the Day of Judgment, who don't take muhasabah of themselves. That's what Umar radiallahu anhu said, take yourselves to account before you are taken to account by someone else. And then, so in Fayd al-Qadir, قال الشيخ Ibn Arabi, he says, so this he's describing and I'll finish with this inshallah, he's describing the quality of the pious people before him. He would say, كان أشياخنا يحاسبون أنفسهم. That our teachers and our pious predecessors, they would take account of themselves على ما يتكلمون به وما يفعلون, of that which they would speak and that which they would do with their actions. وَيُقَيِّدُونَهُ فِي دَفْتَرٍ, and they would write them down in a book. Imagine, they would write this, what they said throughout the whole day and what they did throughout the whole day in a book, like journaling. فَإِذَا كَانَ بَعْدَ الْعِشَاءِ حَاسَبُوا نُفُسَهُمْ. So this was the daily practice after Salatul Isha. Daily practice. وَأَحْتَرُوا دَفْتَرُهُم. So after Isha they would sit down, they would bring their notepads and they would write. وَنَذَرُوا فِي مَا صَدَرَ مِنْهُ مِنْ قَوْلٍ وَعَمَلٍ. Then they would look, after it's written down, then they would look, okay, what did I do today? وَقَابَلُوا كُلًّا مِمَّا بِمَا يَسْتَحِقُّ إِنْ اسْتَحَقَّ اسْتِغْفَارًا اسْتَغْفَرُوا. And then they will look, after they look at the actions, they will see what's deserving of this now. So if they had done any mistakes, then it's deserving that they do istighfar, they engage in istighfar. أو التوبة, or they would do tawbah. أو شكرا شكورا شكروا, or gratitude is necessary. So then if they've done good deeds, then they'll do shukr. ثم ينامون, and only then they would sleep. فزدنا عليهم في هذا الباب الخواتم فكنا نقيد ما نحدث به نفوسنا ونهم به ونحاسبه عليه. And he said many others that they've heard of the mashayikh, not just the speech and the actions, many of them would even write their thoughts down. What thoughts came into my heart throughout the whole day? So if constant bad thoughts came in, they would even write this down and say, how do I remove this? Why are these bad thoughts coming into my heart? And if good thoughts came in, then they would also write these down as well. So this is how true believers they think. They take themselves to account. A sinful person, they don't really care about sins, good deeds, bad deeds, where they look with their eyes, what they do with their hands. That's why the Salaf, they would say, a munafiq, a hypocrite, when he does a sin, it's just like a fly hovering over his head. It's not bothered, it's not bothered. But a true believer, a single sin is like a mountain over their heads. They can't get to rest, they can't get to peace until this mountain, because it's just a burden over their heads, and they need to get rid of it for their hearts to be at peace. So this is how we need to be. A true believer is always in the muraqabah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Constantly. How is it possible that we as believers can forget Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Sometimes hours and hours go by. Imagine every single second. Imagine if the ni'mah, the blessing of Allah, is taken away from us for a single second. How many of us can see without the help of Allah? How many of us, our hearts can beat without the help of Allah? How many of our bodies will function without the help of Allah? We're constantly taking, every single second, we're taking millions and millions of favors and blessings from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, walking on Allah's land. We're eating from the food Allah has given us, clothing from the clothes that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, every single second. But yet, this slave, while taking everything, We forget Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours, and then days, sometimes what happens, we don't even pray our salah, and days go by, and then we pray our salah. How unfortunate is this person? So we as slaves, we need to be making sure that we're always in the muraqab of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Before we have a long task ahead of us, one thing that some mashayikh, they say, that before you start your task, stop for 1 minute or even 30 seconds, think about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then what you do, then you continue a task. Halfway through the task, stop your task again, thinking about Allah, the blessings of Allah, do shukr to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then continue a task. So it shouldn't be that a whole hour or 2 hours goes by and we haven't even thought about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala once. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all the ability to act upon this, inshallah.